Go. We go. Good morning, everybody. Contemporary Issues class, September 23rd to 19 today. Okay, don't want to jump ahead here. Nice to have everybody here. We've got 6 on Zoom and 10, 12 of us in class. So that's not a bad start for getting back into church. So we are happy everybody's here. And we're going to talk today about, Ron's going to talk today about a book called Canary in the Coal Mine. And I like it that it's going to have the principles of harm reduction from the Bible. That sounds pretty interesting too. So we are, as you all know, continuing to Zoom, even though we're in class now, and we are kind of, as I said, kind of winging it from our laptops because the room is not wired completely yet for like surround sound and surround cameras, which they're going to have for us. So it'll be like a neat experience for Zoom people too, like they are here. So that should happen, they say, any day now that you're supposed to get it installed. So it'll be a better experience than trying to keep up and hear what's going on in the room. So before we start, usual announcements, mute yourself on the lower left corner of your screen. And we are recording this for future playback. And I'll have to tell you a funny story. My wife is not here today because she's taking her 87-year-old aunt back to the airport, who's been visiting us. But Aunt Melba was with us last Sunday here in class, and she said, I love it so much. I wish I could stay with you in Denver and see your class. You have such good topics. And I said, well, through the miracle of the internet, Aunt Melba, you can stay with us and see our class and even the videos of the last class, the recent classes. And so she said, oh, I'm going to do that at home. I know how to do that on my computer. Yeah, we were glad for that. So we're going to do that. And also, we want to announce that Ron Puning, our main speaker, often our presenter, is having a birthday today, the 70th birthday, a big one for Ron. And happy birthday to Ron. And we have a little Ron Factory that it's in my, I'm not going to turn around and get it from my briefcase, but we know you like Cheesecake Factory. And so we got a little gift card for you. So hope you'll take me and Vicky to Cheesecake Factory. Yeah. Okay. Also, let me mention, just from the sermon today, I thought the sermon was extra special today because I thought it really spoke to us as a church because we love to question. And that's what it was all about today. It's all right to be a skeptic, to question your faith and your life. And I just thought it was really good. So if you haven't seen it today, go and see Rev Mark's sermon because it was really, I'm going to email it to people so they can be okay with their questioning of their faith. And if you didn't have an I'm saved experience that you can point to at 9 o'clock on a certain date, it's still okay. And that I thought that was really important to explain that and make people feel it's okay. Yeah. So I encourage that for you. And if you're watching this on a replay, go back and find September 19 sermon and take a look at that. Okay. Any other announcements? Anybody going on any neat things? Or I guess we have an all church meeting coming up too on October 3rd, where they tell about the goals and things for the church. So if you haven't put that on your calendar and you'd like to hear that kind of thing, that will be a good meeting for the church. Yeah, in person, probably in Fellowship Hall, I think. Yep, that was on Mark's weekly email. Okay. With that, if no more announcements, we will hear about the... Sure, Gene.
University of Colorado Hospital. We're looking for booster shot. Moderna.
Great.
UC is open.
Gene, Gene is telling us the Zoom folks can't hear, so I'm repeating. That's okay. For the time being, temporarily, I'll be repeating into the laptop so they can hear. Gene said he and his wife got their booster shots at UC Health. And can you just call up UC Health and do that? By appointment. So your Moderna shots. So we've heard a lot about Pfizer, but not so much about Moderna boosters. So we appreciate that. It's half a dose that the earlier one was. Okay. Good to know. Okay. Very good. Okay. Let's go ahead. We will go to the share screen here, and there is the presentation, and I hit it like that, and we go like this. So you all on Zoom should be able to see it, and it's also behind us here for the folks in the room. Gosh, this is complicated, isn't it? Okay. So we will move this down so we can let Ron see how to move his slides. Okay. Over here.
Just tip it.
Okay, there you go.
Okay.
I think we got it.
Mhm. Right. Got it. Okay, well, welcome everybody. And today's lesson is drawn from what I think is a really good book, Canary in the Coal Mine, written by a doctor who's a very strong Christian, a very young man out of Austin, Indiana, more specifically in southern Indiana. He felt a calling by God to make the world a better place. And he felt his calling was to do it through bringing medical care to a community that was lacking a doctor. Austin is not too far from Cincinnati and Louisville, Kentucky. It's maybe, 60 miles from Cincinnati, closer than that to Louisville, Kentucky. It's in a part of southern Indiana. We'll see it on a map. And this town became, shall we say, infamous for becoming one of the hotbeds of a dual outbreak of HIV, non-sexually transmitted, but transmitted through needles, opioids, and hepatitis C, which seem to be a nasty triumvirate that go together. But so here's a man who really felt a calling, and he's I admire his book because he's very candid about his personal shortcomings. He is not superhuman. He had visions, he had goals, but he also had struggles with his family, went through a divorce. So he's very human, and he doesn't try to hide that in his book, that he's just like all of us, facing the trials of life. So to advance a page, Steve, what do you do here? Okay. No, we need to advance it on yours. Okay. Oh. But we are.
Right. Here, we'll keep trying little things. We just hang. That's weird. We keep trying different things. We'll try to figure it out. Let's stop the share and start over again. No cursor's on. Slides.
We have to go into the PowerPoint app and advance it there. Okay, how do you get the PowerPoint from your computer? Or let's see, can you find files? Drive, open that file. It would probably. Still working it. Hang in there, Zoomers. There we are. Okay. There we go. Will it advance or retract? Good. Okay. We probably need to work as a team here today. Okay. Okay. Yeah, we're right here. Can you hear Susan? You can hear us. Okay. All right. So Austin is a small town in Indiana. It's outside of Scottsburg, only 8 or 9 miles away. But it had a population of 4,200 a decade ago, and it's declined to 3,879. So it was founded as a canning place, canned vegetables, uh, but it's kind of a one employer town, that one fairly large industry. If it's large, it's not. But they made a lot of canned fruits and vegetables, and it's an interesting little southern Indiana town. You can see where it is on the map of southern Indiana there. Okay, it's got a lot of low income people. I should also mention the lack of diversity in Austin. It's very white. There's very few blacks in Scott County. Very few Hispanics. Very few anybody. Quote, plain white folk.
Highland.
Yeah. Okay, let's advance the slide. So the author of the book, William Cook, born in 1971, grew up in southern Indiana, in a very Christian family. Our family went to church every Sunday and a lot of Wednesdays. And he felt a strong calling to provide medical care at the age of 15. So he had a pretty good idea of what he was going to do. His mom and dad came up the Hillbilly Highway. There's a couple of them leading from Kentucky up into Ohio. And his mom married, dropped out of high school, and married at age 16. And his dad joined the Air Force during the Vietnam War. And they came back to southern Indiana, his parents. His mom went back to school and graduated from high school at age 24. Took a while, but she made it. She was encouraged to become a nurse. And so his mom enrolled at Indiana University South. And his dad also went to the same university. So they were two fortunate people that they were Appalachian folk who managed to get into a.
Dave, I hate
get
to
through-
interrupt, but you got two mics open up in your room there. We're getting a lot of feedback from one or the other.
Okay. Hmm. Yeah, we need it for that. Yeah. Or, oh, shoot. Oh, keep it Of course, we got it back. Woo. Okay. Can you hear us? You can hear.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Class operation, aren't we?
All right.
There we
In the book, William gives a lot of details about his family, and they certainly were not shall we say, a well-educated, prosperous, middle-class family. They certainly came out of the Appalachian heritage, uh, having come up from Kentucky. William had a very interesting thing happen to him. At age 15, he had a serious blood condition that dropped his platelet level so low they couldn't even measure it. And he needed a series of transfusions to treat this condition known as thrombocytopenic purpura. That's a good one. Dangerous, really dangerous, but fortunately, very treatable and very curable. So he did get blood transfusion and made a full recovery, but still, a very traumatic thing happened to a 15-year-old. Okay, about the same time that his experience with a blood issue occurred, Ryan White of Kokomo, Indiana, who became a national figure, experienced his collision with HIV, I'll call it, through a blood transfusion. And of course, Ryan was given severe shunning and persecution. I mean, here's a poor kid, no fault of his. He picked up HIV through a blood transfusion. But Ryan White's life and the fact that he'd come from southern Indiana, not too far from where William Cook was, made an impact. U.S. Congress passed a major piece of AIDS legislation, the Ryan White Care Act, shortly after Ryan's death, which was signed by then President George Bush. And it's a program that is a provider of services for people all over the country and for HIV and AIDS. Interestingly enough, at that time, 63% of the people with hemophilia at that time in the early 80s contracted HIV before the blood transfusion process and the medical community figured it out. So Ryan was just one of many, many who lost his life through blood transfusion acquired HIV. Vance? Okay, a little bit more about William. So William, of course, having overcome this 15-year-old, age 15, encountered blood issue, attended Indiana University Southeast with the help of the Pell Grant and the help of his dad's veteran benefits. He struggled for the first 2 years. He says, my study habits were lousy. He fell out of place among the students from the wealthier families. He kind of, didn't fit in, but he was smart. He gained traction. He learned how to study. His fellow students gave him some help. He went on to get married and acquire a master's in biology in a school in Indianapolis. He scored near the top on medical licensing exams. Sept was accepted at Indiana University School of Medicine with the specific condition that he took this loan, and he was required to provide primary medical care to a southern Indiana rural community that was in dire need of a doctor of his choosing. So he chose a town that was very close to where his in-laws were. And he said, as a Christian, upon graduation, sought a place God would be able to use him the most. Adopted Jesus explanation, they that may have life and have it more abundantly. So he set up in Austin, a little town of less than 5,000 now. And it was good for him because it was near his parents' town of New Albany. He wanted the grandparents to be able to interact with his kids. So he got started, and he got some help from Scott Memorial Hospital in Scottsburg, Indiana. Okay. He opens the clinic, and on about his first day, he picks up a young gal hitchhiking, and she starts talking to him as he's driving to work. And she starts saying, she'd do anything to earn some money. And and he thought, oh, she really needs a job. So he starts talking to her about, what are your skills? Where might you get a job? And she just kept saying, no, I mean, I'll do anything for some money. He dropped her off and he went into his office, talks with his fellow employees, and they said, you're not so naive. You didn't know what she was telling you. You were getting propositioned for, more than just a ride. But he said he said, despite the fact that he'd grown up in rural Indiana, he had some learning to do in terms of the different levels of society and what was going on there. He said as he first opened up, some of the first patients had never seen a doctor before. Coming in age 30, 40, 50, hadn't seen a doctor in their life. He said one fellow had a tumor on his tongue so long, it was carrying around a handkerchief, catching the drool coming off this tumor that was irritating his salivary gland. And he'd gone around for months with this issue. He said a lot of patients came in that had late stages of chronic diseases, things like diabetes, heart disease, cancer. I mean, it was way beyond what I think we'd have seen a doctor about. Jumping over to the adjacent state of Ohio, there's a plot on the Appalachian poverty. This shows the intensity, how many people are on federal poverty in some of the counties of Ohio. And notice they're very much concentrated in the Appalachian Strip, north of Kentucky. And Alice and I lived in a small town in Polk County, Ohio, many, many years ago, for at least 3 years. And we got an insight. It's a different world in that rural community. Okay. Next slide. So William Cook, he said many of the community dismissed the pains of patients as, he said, people kind of blamed these folk coming in, these poor folk, some of whom had not only regular medical issues, but were starting to get drug problems on the side. He said a lot of them got blamed, and he said the average person in the community said those people deserved it because of their laziness, promiscuity, their bad choices, their ignorance. And he said, I really had an education as I did this. He says, as I get to meet the people and get to know them, I found that they were really victimized by their circumstances, more or less. Many were harshly judged for a fate had been sealed in their childhood. And he gives many examples in the book of some of those patients. He mentions first names. He didn't say whether he changed his name, but he talks about some of the horrific family and community environments that they came out of. He said almost impossible to believe. Many were harshly judged, and he goes on to say he was in a church, a little Baptist church, where his dad said, let's bring in some kids. Poor kids came in, didn't have the right clothes. They weren't dressed well. They smelled a little bit. They hadn't been in a shower. And so a lot of people in the church says, get those filthy kids out of here. They're not respectful. And he said his dad always said, you don't take the gospel to them, who will? And they didn't choose to come to church in rags and tatters.
Where does
Okay. And the answer is some of the old miners from hundreds of years ago, when they were working a new mine tunnel, they would literally take a canary in a cage down into the mine because canaries are extremely vulnerable to oxygen deficiencies and will stagger and fall off their perch right away. And so that would give you an early warning that you were going into bad air. The canary would be affected before you were, you get out of there. He felt that this situation going on in Austin, Indiana, which would break out into state and national news, was a canary, was a warning to society of what was happening, opening the eyes. Okay. William went on a mission trip. He did a lot of church work to Haiti, and he kind of said, you know, when I went down in Haiti and worked with the poor there, he said some of the things they're fighting: nutrition, shelter, safety, social status denied. He came back home and looked into the poor areas of Austin and said, we've got the same stuff here. And he actually went out with a pastor of a more progressive church. When I say progressive, it was still a very evangelical church, but it was a pastor. It was kind of a street preacher guy that had a real heart for community, like some of the pastoral staff we've had in this church and whatever, and felt a real heart and a calling to minister to the down and outers. And he said he got quite an education going on some visits with him. So he said all these things he saw in Haiti were there. Again, he went out with his pastor Rick and to pray and meet some of the folks on the poor side of town. And he said he sometimes found 10 or 15 people living together in derelict shacks, broken windows, no electricity, and trash. I know when we lived in Waverly, Ohio, my wife Alice worked a little bit for a social service thing through the college you were at, and you saw a few examples of dirt floors and yeah. And he said, Pastor Rick and I were able to tell the families about the love of God and invite them to our church, but he said we had no way to provide for their basic needs, their clothes, their transportation, food, or a way to escape their life. Pastor Rick assured William, but well, at least their eternal salvation was secure. But William didn't feel very good about that. He said, we may be keeping him from hell in the future, but they're sure going through it now. Hell on earth right now. And again, he was troubled by the attitudes he found, not just people in the church, but people in the community in general. And it's a problem all of us had as middle classers, particularly better educated and better communities. We tend to think, oh, it's because of their lack of hard work, they're a bunch of lazy bums, et cetera, et cetera. You've heard it all. But he says, only in the right environment with the right opportunities do people really tend to succeed well. And Americans get caught up in the rugged individualism story. So, but we all need community. Some God-fearing people have attitudes like we are mentally, biologically, and spiritually better than they. Helping them through giving them a needle program or something enables bad people to do bad things. We must protect ourselves from these people, and we work hard for what we have and must protect what we have from them. So there's a picture there of some folks from the Westboro Baptist Church. You've all unfortunately heard of that one. But protesting in their harsh and doom, judgmental way. Okay. Call this slide America High again. And he said, gram for gram, people in the United States consume more narcotic medication than any nation worldwide. We consume 83% of the world's oxycodone and 99% of the world's hydrocodone. That's the opiate, and Vicodin and Loratab. And he said the oxycodone street price is $1 a milligram. A 40 milligram tablet is like a pair of $20 bills. And the overdose deaths rose from 10 a day, this is in the United States, in 1999, to 48 a day in 2012. Now, I haven't even updated some of the latest, but you can see the national opioid death, and it's. I don't think you can say it's peaked yet. Data, it's still going up, and the data, and I don't think the pandemic has helped combat the drug abuse. Not. Okay, so this shows, this is 2018 data. This shows the opioid-involved overdose death rates per capita. And as you can see, Ohio, West Virginia, and of course, Indiana, very close, are hotbeds of opioid deaths. This is also a map of Indiana, and the county he is in is, I don't know if I can point it out. It's down there in it's the darkest color one in the far south right corner. That's,
Colorado looks pretty good on that.
yeah, per capita, we're not as bad as some of the states. Okay. And the opioid epidemic has evolved. We've gone from, there was the rise in the mid-90s, rise in prescription opioid deaths. It's a rise, wave 2, in heroin deaths. And then about 2017, manufactured fentanyl, which is cheaper and more potent than heroin, started coming in. And unfortunately, yeah, the curves are going the wrong way. So it's probably not getting as much attention now that they've cracked down on the oxycodone and is it Purdue Pharmaceutical, but it's still, by no means is the battle over. Okay, so his big morning, he said, was February 26, 2015 in the morning paper. Stuff hits the fan. The Indiana state health officials were collecting data from all the counties and said that they had confirmed 26 cases in his county. And it was the largest, this is HIV. It was the largest outbreak that the state had ever experienced in one region. So again, 26 cases in this one small county. It was hitting the papers, it was hitting the state health boards. And they traced it back to one person with HIV in 2004 that moved to the little town of Austin. And at some point after that, the cases of HIV began to proliferate. And as they did the investigation, they found it was needle sharing it was basically doing. When you have injectable drugs like prescription pills being heavily abused, hepatitis C and HIV are soon to follow.
Remember that, hepatitis for the blood.
Yeah. Al, I don't know if could anybody hear Alice's comment? No, you can't. So I'll have to repeat. Alice noted that her best girlfriend in high school contracted hepatitis C through a blood transfusion that she needed through a pregnancy complication. Yeah, yeah. But this shows Scott County, Indiana's opioid cases. And you can see how between February 2015, when the newspaper article hit, it didn't get any better for the next 2 years. The curve just went up and up. And Dr. Scott got heavily involved in trying to stop it to do what he could do. At this point, Mike Pence was governor of Indiana, and Mike took initially a very conservative position against needle sharing. He opposed it. If you know the politics of Indiana, Scott County voted 72% for Donald Trump, by the way, very heavily Republican rural in southern Indiana. And the idea of doing a state or federal program to supply clean needles was opposed vehemently by the state legislature and by Governor Pence. But things got so bad, so fast. And the sheriff of Scott County looked at the data. Dr. Cook looked at the data, and they went to Indianapolis to lobby the legislature and said, look, I don't care what you think about government provided needles, but they will save lives. It is a way to stop this epidemic. And they did get the legislature to act. Again, the book's got some great personal stories in there. He gives stories talking about Robert, Samantha, and Tammy, and it's a book worth reading. It'll touch your heart, both from a medical standpoint and a Christian standpoint. It's got it all. And he talks about Tammy, a gal who got hooked at 17, and gives her story quite a bit. Well, William himself is only human, as he mentions. He's got a program in Austin, Indiana, called Foundations Family Medicine. You can see the cross in that tree. He began to question God about his purpose as a physician and why he'd been called to such a, he said, place that seemed to be forsaken by him. Here he is with about the only treatment physician office in the county, and the place is just getting overwhelmed with this. He's human too, he said. After many years of counseling, he gave up hope for his marriage, filed for divorce. He grieved over the breakup of his marriage for quite a while. He wondered about his dream, his hope in Austin, his purpose as a physician, his role as a father. And he said the monotony, the divorce, the exhaustion, and he felt alone and forsaken. He then said he went on a mission trip to the Amazon, and he had kind of a rebirth. He said he started to see that he needed to let go of thinking of himself and thinking more of the attitude of, I'll do my best, I'll give it my all, but God or somebody has to help with this situation. I can't bear the burden at all. I can't personally pull us out of this. Okay, slide. The long fight. So the political debate after lifting the ban on syringe exchanges got going. Mike Pence was encouraged to stand strong against syringe services, but finally, it was kind of a, shall we call him a independent Republican dude, Ed Clary, from New Albany nearby, had a different attitude towards fighting drugs. Said, you know, we got to do something. He introduced legislation to allow the distribution of sterile needles throughout Indiana. So here's an example just of a politician who has the guts to go against his party and push for something, and he got it through. But he did pay a price. In November of 2015, Clary, that's the last name of this, the Speaker of the Indiana House, Brian Bosma, said he demoted Representative Ed Clary of New Albany because of rudeness in his dealing with the committee members. He was the main sponsor of the bill, and he also ticked off Governor Pence because Clary, a Republican, was supposed to go along and oppose the Indiana Medicaid expansion, but he didn't. He said, no, we need more Medicaid. We need this help. And so he stood against the crowd and paid a price for it. And we're doing on time. Okay. There was a study during the Vietnam War mentioned in the book, and the Vietnam War really did more damage to this country than we'll ever know. 85% of the service people in Vietnam were offered heroin, and about 35% tried it. This is one piece of data. The data could be a little off, but it certainly tells a story. About 20% of the 35% who tried it became addicted. And yet, 1 year after coming home, nearly 90% of those addicted recovered. And I've got some question as to the accuracy of that data, but he said it does show that the toxic stress of war and isolation from family in a foreign land made the soldiers very vulnerable to addiction. And he said that carried over to his experience from what he saw in southern Indiana. The folks who were in these poor homes with terrible conditions, lack of electricity, broken marriage families, all these things had so much stress on them that they became far more easy victims for the dragon of opioid addiction. Yeah. Okay. So Dr. Cook became a very open-minded and progressive kind of guy pretty quickly. His faith took a different kind of turn. You can see where he embraced, we don't need judgment, we need understanding. He opened the clinic, and you can see the sign there, free HIV, Hep C testing, rapid results. We're here to help you. And when they put up this sign and started advertising that there was a free clinic for people to come in this ravaged county, they started receiving bomb threats and personal threats from the people of the community. They weren't putting drugs, they were just trying to offer a clinic to try to find, help, and heal these people. They had a Day of Hope, July 25th, 2015. They had a parade and set up tents, had volunteers, and really tried to do what they can to get the people, particularly the down and outers, to come in. And it started working. He mentioned the outcomes of people born in poverty. He said his mom had the good fortune of meeting people who took her under their wing, and despite being a mom at age 16 without a high school degree, they started helping her, giving her some aid. But he said his mom's sister didn't get any good role models to step in and help her. And he said his aunt saw nothing but dysfunction and abuse, became pregnant at 13, married 5 times, and never found love and validation. So he said he gave several examples from his family of how if you can just get some folks in your group or to give you show some personal interest, help you, give you some strength, you got a good chance of getting out of poverty and drug problems. But if you don't get any help, don't get many role models or help, you're probably going to go down the tubes. Okay, there's a nice, he's got some nice charts and stuff at the back of the books, talking about needs met and unmet needs. He does in the very last chapter of the book. He doesn't get into politics, well, other than talking about his experience with the legislature and this courageous person. But he does say this: by investing now in infrastructure, healthcare, equity, and life-affirming programs, we can slow and even prevent the spread of disease, disability, and death. So even though he doesn't come out and give a certain political thing, you can see where he says, we need more of America's resources put into things to combat poverty, to combat health issues, education, infrastructure, all this kind of stuff. So it's kind of clear where he's gone. And of course, he's a very strong Christian, and he's got, he proclaims that throughout his book. He talks about, we're about ready to get into the question set, social determinants of health. Health services includes quality, availability, and affordability. He said, here's what he's seen. That he said, so much of your health is dependent upon your getting these things to undergird you. One was health services, personal behavior, your early childhood education experiences, type of work, your social environment, which includes your class, inequity, if you've encountered it, opportunity, sense of community, physical environment, security, and then even genes and biology. And so he said, some believe the first four determinants determine 80% of your. Okay, we're going to wrap up today by going through the 10 biblical principles of harm reduction. He said, here's how I've learned to interpret the Bible. And he quotes St. Augustine with that first one, observe the law of love. He really goes into a bit of detail and said, forget about applying rules with such strictness. Who gets communion? What you got to wear to the church, or these kind of things. And, or even you got to go to church on Sunday and not a different day. He said, when it all comes down, always push the rules away and have the principle of love override them. And then seek and save, he said, go to the people. You can't expect them to come to you. You got to go find them. He said, treating people on drugs, he found some recovered people and who volunteered, say, we know where to find those people, and we can go invite them and get them to this clinic, where they may not listen to the mayor standing on a street corner soapbox. So he found people in his practice that would spread the word to the community that they were either still in or had come to. And he said, do not condemn. Even today, we're seeing a lot of churches that are almost defining themselves by what they condemn. And he also is now a huge believer on meeting the physical needs. He said, if you go into a poverty-stricken area of Haiti and you pass out Bibles, said, he's got real doubts. He said, yeah, you gotta help them out, he said. And he said, you gotta love people lavishly. You said, yes, we should hate harmful behaviors, because people we love are trapped in them. He said, but passing out hate and judgment on these people isn't going to help them, isn't going to rescue them. And he gives innumerable examples of people that have and are being rescued by his work that's part of many other things going on there. He said, you gotta love the people. You can't just put them behind bars and lock them up and kick them. Don't be self-righteous. Put people before morality. You don't tell a couple, you're living together, you sinners, say, okay, you may not care for that, what they chose, their lifestyle, but don't preach at them and tell them they're sinners. Condemnation on them. He also said we need to seek community cures. So the community has a role in helping people. It takes a village. It's more than just one person, one effort. Surrender to the greater. He said he's had to learn to be part of the story, not insist you being the story. He's gotten some awards, Family Physician of the Year. He said he's had to learn to be humble, to realize he didn't do it. It was a whole bunch of people working together. He got to play a role, but he didn't do it. So let's open it up for some more questions and discussion. If you want to read a great story. I guess I particularly got caught by it because it's pretty close to Cincinnati where I grew up, and the fact that we had lived in a rural part of Ohio for at least 3 years, and I got to see that rural component of the Midwest, so I could relate to it. Also, when we go back there, we cut through southern Indiana, and we're going to stop at a state park about 20 miles as the crow flies from Austin. So,
Statement of life and habits.
I'm always impressed and intimidated by those stories where people go to those kind of places and serve that way so completely selflessly. And it reminds me of the nurses and doctors today that are treating the COVID patients, and we hear their stories about how exhausted they are in the ICUs today. Just plays out in so many different ways today still. Too. And the opioid problem is still going on, isn't it, Ron? In
oh yeah,
Kentucky, all through the South,
yes.
especially. Not just the South and not just rural areas, is it? Yeah.
Civic Park, and
That's right. Civic Park Denver just closed down. Highlands, Littleton, Alice says. But yeah, Civic Center Park, right next to our Capitol, was just closed down because of the rampant drug use, people shooting up in the middle of the day, and rats and things. Sad, right in the middle of Denver.
Wasn't the area closed for a few days to clean up this?
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
Mhm.
Kind of a black eye for Denver.
It's been Rocket City, so this is very close to the reservation. And so we used to go down to the reservation. And, you know, right till the hurricanes, you know, the room, you know, and they were there, keep
Yeah, Lois says that she visited Indian reservations and they're very much that way too. A lot of opioid and alcohol problems on Indian reservations now,
a lot of drinking.
and alcohol.
Mid 60s, then President Lyndon Johnson started a war on poverty program. And it was actually, if you look at the data, it was working. It was starting to knock the numbers down of the things we don't want society. But it got derailed by the money got diverted over to the war. So the war on poverty didn't lose, it got sidetracked by the other war.
Ourselves and going on in our own town, about building our
Yeah, our
shacks, and, you know.
folks here in class are saying it's like the homeless problem now too. And obviously in Denver and many other places, the homeless problem is tied to the drug problem and the poverty, and homelessness is not seemingly getting any better.
This is another good thing.
It showed that the poverty, the drug addiction, and whatever, sometimes we as white folk tend to think, oh, it's in the, you know, it's minorities, it's some other ethnicity. But this book clearly shows, boy, it's right in there with us. Claim exemption from it.
Yeah, we've got about 5 minutes left. Susan, you had a comment. Go ahead.
Sorry, were you speaking to me, Steve? I couldn't quite hear you.
Sorry, yes, go ahead, Susan.
Yeah. So I just wanted to say, we've talked about this before, but there are a number of countries that are testing out the universal basic income to try to deal with those basic physical needs, and with great success. But it's a question of whether it can be adopted, and there's an appetite in all the countries that need it for that kind of support.
Good point. Yeah, Susan's talking about universal basic income, give everybody $12,000 or $18,000 a year to help live. Yeah, what's everybody think about that? Is it like welfare, unearned? Is it good idea, bad idea, controversial? That's for sure.
we're gonna spend it someplace else.
Jim Holmes here says we're going to spend it someplace. If we don't give it to them up front, we spend it on the back end.
Well, and it's efficacious as well.
Interestingly enough, during the pandemic, the tremendous infusion of federal funds that have gone out has knocked down poverty a great deal, surprisingly enough.
Has there been a corresponding decline in drug abuse?
Don't know what the data is right now.
A major problem Colorado has, there's not enough housing for the job market.
And all things are
Tied together too, aren't they? They all come together and you can't solve one, it seems, without addressing the others too. Okay. We got about 11:30. Want to wrap up? Any final thoughts? We just barely scratched the surface on this one. We could talk a lot about all these issues. Well, thank you, Ron, for another good presentation. I'm glad we captured it on the recording. We'll go back and let people join in this. Any other thoughts? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron.
Okay.
Terrific.
Thank you, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Mhm.